Imagine having an AI assistant that not only helps you code, but actually understands your database, follows best practices, and boosts your productivity like never before. Today, we're combining the power of Cursor AI agents with Supabase to make building apps easier than ever, whether you're a seasoned developer or just getting started. I'll break down how Cursor agent works, how to connect them to your Supabase database, and even build a beautiful app that users can use. Let's dive in. So let's start up by creating the front end. I've already opened up Cursor, but let's open up a directory that we can work in. Go up to File, Open Folder, and I'm just going to choose my development directory, and we can create a new folder in here. We can just call it Cursor Next. And hit Open. Okay, so now that we have a directory right here, I guess we can hit Command I to open up Composer and get started with developing, right? But instead of diving right into writing the prompts, I like to start out with a AI agent. Anything is fine, ChatGPT, Claude. I like to use Claude just because generally it feels like it gives me better results for developing applications. But we can start out with a sample prompt, something like this, where we are asking Claude that we want to develop a Next.js application within the current working directory. And we're also asking it to remove any initial boilerplate code that comes with the default Next.js app. If you don't know what Next.js is, it's probably the most popular way of developing web applications today. And some of these things that I've added, TypeScript, Tailwind, these are also very popular technologies that you couldn't really go wrong with. Next.js, TypeScript, Tailwind, these are the go-to technologies for developing apps these days. And lastly, I'm asking it the output should be in Markdown format. So let's hit send, and this is going to give us a set of instructions that we can just pass on to Cursor agent, which would set up a minimal Next.js application that we can just get started working with. Okay, so we can just hit copy to copy the entire instruction, paste it right in there. Scroll all the way down. We don't need this last. Would you like me to explain? Blah, blah, blah part. And we can get rid of this trailing 3 dot comma. And also we can get rid of the top. I'll provide a step-by-step guide, blah, blah, blah bit. And that should be good. We should be able to give this instructions to Cursor agent. Make sure that the agent mode is selected instead of the normal mode, and hit submit. So I'll be accepting all the instructions that is giving us, because with these set of prompts, you can't really expect Cursor to do anything dangerous. But yeah, Cursor agent does give you options of whether you want to accept or not. And once you get to this point, you need to accept, you need to basically choose a few things, like whether you want to have the code inside a source directory or not. You can just hit return a whole bunch of times to just go with the default choices, because that's always the best. Maybe not necessary, but in this case, it's good enough. And it's what most people choose anyway. So right now, Cursor agent is running the Next.js command to set up all these boilerplate code. And then once it's done, it'll then proceed to taking care of my second instructions, which is deleting all the boilerplate code, because yeah, it's a whole lot of mess that you don't really want to deal with. So I like to make everything simpler. It got rid of a whole bunch of code on my page.tsx file, and then now layout.tsx file. It's also taking care of some CSS boilerplate that just exists right off the bat. And then it's deleting some unused images. And then lastly, it gives me this terminal command to run the application locally. once the application is up and running, we can click this, open, and see the app in action. And we have a beautiful app. We do have a single error, but I think that's fine for now. The app is being displayed. Nice and beautiful. Now that we have an empty app that we can work with, we're gonna have Cursor Agent build a beautiful UI for us. And to do that, we're gonna drag and drop an image into Cursor Agent. We can head over to Dribbble to browse some ideas. I've searched simple web app, and I think I like this first design. We can take a screenshot of it and bring it over. Let's open a new Cursor Composer window, drag it in there, make sure we're on agent mode, and ask Cursor to recreate this design. We can tag the current page, so we can ask Cursor to create it in the current page, which is the page.tsx file under source/app. Hit submit. Note that Cursor Agent did some searching within the code base to analyze what's going on, what kind of components we already have, and what kind of things we don't have. And then it's installing a bunch of things that we currently do not have in this project. This particular command installed some icons that we can use, and also some charts libraries that we can use to recreate that dashboard. Note that from my experience, uploading an image and asking Cursor to recreate that design in code takes a lot of time. So be patient. I think it'll happen if you wait for like a minute or two. But finally we got it. I think it should look good. We can just take a quick look once everything is done generated. I think it's done generated. So we can go back and view our beautiful application. He even gave us this nice animation. And yeah, I am very impressed with the UI that it created. So I'm just going to hit accept all. At this point, we can almost get started with Supabase code, but let's do some cleanups beforehand. One thing I noticed with the source code is a lot of these data are hard-coded, meaning they are literally just typed up within the code base. Like for example, this credit card number right here is just typed in there. It's just a static HTML, and there's no efficient way of updating this value within the code, which doesn't work out great when we later add Supabase for it. And we can do the cleanup later or right now, but let's just do it right now because it's always better to modify the code base when it's lean. Let's open up a new Cursor window, and here's a magic prompt that we can use. So I'm asking Cursor here to extract anything that seems like a variable and take them away and store it in a separate file. And we're going to call them hooks. This is a term that's often used within the React context. But yeah, it just means that we're extracting all these values as separate variables so that it's easier to work with. So let's just submit. So Cursor is just listing out all the variables that you could find within the page, and it's extracting them in a file called usefinancialdata.ts. which looks something like this. So basically, all these variables are now extracted and they can be modified by the application. The way it works later is when we actually add Supabase later on, we are going to fetch all the values from Supabase and we are going to inject those values as the values of these variables. I believe it's also modifying the page.tsx file so that it can actually use this use financial data hook that we just created. And I think it's done. I think it looks good. Let's try it out, give it a refresh. All the data are still there, and if we make a modification within this use financial data, for example, let's give it a huge bump in March, we can see that if we refresh the page, there's that huge bump in March. So we can see that the variable is probably being reflected within the application. Alright, I think we're ready to get started with Supabase. We can head over to database.new to create a new Supabase project, Or we can actually use the Supabase CLI to spin up a Supabase project locally, meaning it sits in your machine. There's so many advantages of using a local version of Supabase instance, which I'll explain along the way. Let's ask Cursor agent to create a local Supabase instance. We don't need to reference any files. So I've asked Cursor to set up Supabase locally using the Supabase CLI basically. So first, it's trying to run the Supabase init command. Let's run it. And we can just hit return to accept installing these packages. We don't need to generate VS Code settings or Dino settings. We can just hit return for all of them. Great. Now we have a Supabase directory within here, and we have various config files and stuff, but we don't really need to touch them for now. So let's proceed. And it's trying to run the Supabase start command, which spins up the local Supabase instance. So let's run it. And we get an error. Okay, so we are getting a bunch of errors and it's trying to solve that, but let's actually stop it here because Cursor failed to execute the Supabase start command because we didn't have Docker running in our machine. Docker is a tool used by developers to package an app with everything that it needs to run so that it can run the same way whether it's on your machine or some servers out there. Once installed, you can just click to open up Docker Desktop, and there's no configuration whatsoever that you need to tweak. You just have to have it running in the background. Now that we have Docker running, let's try to rerun the same prompt that we had earlier. Okay, I guess it found out that this directory was created, but it's just running it just in case, which has no harm. It just runs through the same process, and Supabase CLI knows that it's already there, so it's not gonna do anything. But we got to the Supabase start command. Let's run it, which should spin up a local instance of Supabase. And this might take a pretty long time if you're running it for the first time. Could take a few minutes depending on various things that's happening on your machine. But just sit there, enjoy a cup of coffee or something, and come back a few minutes later. And it has spun up. If we scroll up, we can see various information about the local instance of Supabase. We can view the API URL, we can find the anon key, but if we copy and paste this studio URL, or if we just click into it, it opens up the Supabase dashboard basically that we all have seen in the cloud version of Supabase. The nice thing about this dashboard is it's a local version of the Supabase. It's a safe environment. We can just basically go nuts with creating whatever table we want, deleting any data that we want, and testing out all things in Supabase. Now that we have local Supabase instance running, it's time to connect our application with the Supabase instance. Let's open up a new Composer window and ask Cursor to create the tables that we need for this app. So within this prompt, I'm asking Cursor to run the migration command of Supabase CLI. This migration command creates a new migration file within the Supabase directory, which is just a SQL file that keeps track of what kind of updates that happen within the database. Once that migration file is created, I'm asking Cursor to create tables that could hold the data that are present within this use financial data .ts file. And then once the table is created, I'm asking it to then create some seed data, basically some sample data that we can use to load within this application. And then lastly, at the end, we're asking Cursor to run Supabase database reset so that we can fetch all the sample data that it has created. I'm going to use npx to run that command. Let's run it. So the use npx bit that I added at the end just means that there's a few ways you could run the Supabase command, and having npx at the beginning allows you to run Supabase commands without going through the installation process of the Supabase CLI. Long story short, it's easier to use the NPX version of it. So here we are. So it ran the Supabase migration new, gave it a name, financial data tables, and then it created this migration file. So this migration file was created by the Supabase CLI. And then it's going on and adding a bunch of these tables to hold all the data present within the app. And then it's also creating a c.sql file within the Supabase directory, which holds some sample data. I think it all looks good. Let's accept all and run the command. And this could take a minute or so. Okay, the app itself isn't connected to Supabase yet, but we can view all the data within our Supabase dashboard. Let's update our code so that our app can load the data from our Supabase instance. So within this prompt, I'm asking Cursor to load the data from Supabase. And I also provided the SQL file for the table structure so that Cursor knows what kind of tables there are within the Supabase database. So first, it's asking us to install Supabase.js, which is the correct library to load the data within this application. Now it has generated the environment variables for us to load these data. And I think it is the correct environment variables. It's not a placeholder or random values. So that should be good. So it generated a new Supabase.ts file, which loads the environment variables and initializes a Supabase client library, which is required to fetch the data from the Supabase database. And then it's going on to updating the use financial data hook so that it can actually load the data from Supabase. And from a quick glance, it looks okay. Let's see. We can always test it out before accepting it, right? So we can go back to the app. Let's hit refresh. And it looks like the app is loading. I see one error. Generally, this hydration failed error isn't the biggest concern, so it might be fine. Let's just tweak the numbers. So, okay, total balance. I wonder where this value is coming from. Revenue data, sure. Let's tweak the revenue data. So we remember we pumped up the numbers in March, which is, oh, it's this one. Okay. We're gonna have to, the order is now messed up, so we're gonna have to do something about that. But let's forget that for now, and let's change this March number to something even bigger, because why not? So, yeah, 13.5k USD. Why not? And if we hit refresh, we can see that the data has been updated. So we can confirm that the data is being loaded from Supabase. And we can hit accept all. Now that we have connected Supabase to our app and the data is being loaded from our Supabase database, why don't we fix that issue that we saw with the chart? When I take a look at the chart, I notice that the month is being sorted with the alphabetical order and not the numerical order. So A, J, J, M, M, so on. And this is a problem. And if we take a look at the database, how these data are stored, the month is actually just a string. It's not a number, or it doesn't represent a date. It's just a string of texts. And because the data format is not a actual date time or date or anything, the issue is being caused. And the proper solution for this is to drop this month column and then introduce a new month column with a proper date type column, which can properly hold date time values and can be sorted with date and so on. And the application should be able to handle that nicely. So let's go back to Cursor and ask Cursor to do that. So the prompt I'm giving Cursor is, first I'm explaining the issue that I'm experiencing a sorting issue with the month column of the revenue data table. And the cause is because the month column is a string type. So I'm asking it to update it to a date type. And I'm also asking it to use the Supabase CLI again to create a migration file and then update the column type there. I also mentioned that not just updating the tables, but it should also update the c.sql file so that it can properly insert some dummy date type columns. Lastly, I'm also asking it to update the application code so that the app can handle the date type column coming in instead of the string type. So it's starting out with running the Supabase migration command, which created this new migration file. Now it should be writing into this migration file to update the table data, which it is doing. It has also updated the c.sql file so that instead of having month as strings, it has actual date values. And yeah, everything looks good. Let's just accept all and run the db reset command, which again could take a minute or so, but once the database is back up and running, we should be able to view the new format of data. Alright, db reset is done running. We can see the new month column. The type has been updated, and let's take a look at the application. If we hit refresh, we see that, okay, so we see the dates being displayed, which works. I like the alphabetical display representation right here, but that works as well. I wonder if we can just ask a quick ask to Cursor to update the format. So I'm telling Cursor that although most of the updates were good, I like the 3-letter abbreviation display of the month, so update the app so that it can actually kind of keep that design. Interesting, it's actually updating the use financial data.ts to do that. I thought it would take care of it on the page.tsx file, but let's just trust Cursor and see what it does. So it's as the data is coming in from Supabase, it's actually updating the format right there on the fly, which works. Yeah, sure, let's accept it and let's take a look. Hit refresh and we have one error. That is because that's not the hydration error. I wonder what happened. Display month. If we take a look at the page.tsx file, you know what? Oh yeah, revenue data is here, right? Yeah, use financial data, revenue results, and format revenue data. You know what? Let's ask Cursor once again. Hopefully this prompt works. But if it doesn't, I guess this is not a big deal. I'm just gonna move on. Let's see if Cursor can figure it out. It's doing something that it didn't do before, which is scanning through the code base. And yeah, it is actually indeed tweaking the page.tsx file to modify the display month, which sounds like the right approach. And it is March, April, May, June, July, August. Beautiful. I love it. Let's accept it. Now that we have edited one of the tables, we now have 2 migration files. And if you remember from earlier in the video, I provided one of the migration file as context for Cursor so that it can understand the database schema. But now that we have 2 migration files, and if the project keeps growing, we're gonna get many more migration files. It's not realistic at all to throw every single migration file along the way to Cursor just because we wanted it to understand the database schema. Well, how can we fix this? We can actually tackle this issue by using Model Context Protocol, or MCP. MCP was developed by Anthropic, the company behind Claude, and it's basically a standardized protocol for AI to talk to various tools such as database. And luckily, there is an official Postgres MCP server that we can just use with Supabase. And if we take a look at the documentation, for local Supabase instance, we can first run this npx Supabase status command to get all the credentials. And then basically we can just copy and paste this command into the cursor settings page. So let's open up a new terminal and run this Supabase status command, and we get all these credentials. The one that we want should be the DB URL, which is this one. So let's copy that one and let's go to settings. Let's close this terminal. Features, and there's a MCP servers. Let's add a MCP server. I'm just gonna paste in what I have in the clipboard. We're gonna change the type to command. Server name can be local Supabase or whatever you want to name it. And let's copy this piece of string, and the DB URL goes at the end. So let's go to the beginning. We can delete this whole thing, and this should do it. All right, let's check out if Cursor can take a look at our database schema through MCP. So we can simply ask something like what tables there are in the database. We could just say what tables there are in the database and just make sure that it uses MCP. I'm just saying use MCP. And the cursor made a call using the MCP to our database and got all the table info such as card info, transactions, expense categories, weekly metrics, and revenue data, which matches the set of tables that we have in our database. Great. Let me get more details about the structure of these tables. Sure, why not? So I'm assuming it's... I don't have to assume, I can take a look at what kind of query it's throwing its way. So it's taking a look at the table name, the column name, data type, basically returning more detailed breakdown of the table. So yeah, along with the table name, it's returning the column name, column types. So great. I guess in this video, I won't go into like actually adding another feature that would require table context. But using this prompt or something similar, you could always add the database schema as context to Cursor. One issue with this MCP server is currently there is no project level settings for MCP, meaning I set this MCP server command right here, but if I have another Supabase project that I totally have a very different configuration for this, taking a look at the Supabase instance. For example, if I'm actually connected to the remote instance, then I'm gonna have to update it here. And if I come back to this project, I'm gonna have to update it again. But hopefully in the future, we get project level MCP settings so that we can have different MCP server settings per project. But for now, this is the way to go. I think our application is coming together and it's almost ready to put it out in the public. But one thing we cannot forget is security. When we jump into the Supabase dashboard, we can see this RLS disabled. RLS stands for row level security, and it's the Postgres mechanism to protect data from malicious access. When it's disabled, any user basically can perform any action against this database, such as reading every single data or even deleting every single data, which is not great, right? So we want to enable it, and once we enable it, that actually shuts out every single action against the table. And we can define policies, which are like conditions, which allows certain actions to be performed under certain conditions. So we want to enable it, but there's two ways to enabling it. We can just hit this and enable it from the dashboard, or we can come back to Cursor and let Cursor handle it. which is what we want to do. So this is going to be another migration. And before I dive into Cursor and let it do anything, I want to share another tip that I have. And that is at Supabase, we provide many predefined prompts that we created. So if you go to supabase.com, docs, start, and scroll all the way down, we have set of AI prompts that are that covers a common use cases that occurs with Supabase, and we happen to have one for creating role-level security policies. What you can do is you can just copy this prompt, come back to Cursor, hit Command-Shift-P, and search for new Cursor rules. One at the top, click that, and give it a name. Where'd it go? New Cursor rule. Role level security rule. Sure, why not? And we can paste in what we have here in the content body section. Now, the nice thing about this rules is it comes with a description and a glob. Description is basically when should this rule be applied to what files under what conditions in human language. And globs is against what type of files should this be applied to. In our case, we wanted it to apply to SQL files, so we're just going to specify the SQL. A nice thing about this prompt is it comes with this set of description and globs that you can just copy and paste. And save that. It sits under this .cursor/rules. And once we have that there, whenever we trigger anything that Cursor thinks matches the glob or the description, the rules will be automatically be applied to the prompt that we give to Cursor. So let's have Cursor enable role level security and write a bunch of policies that could basically secure out our application. So in a real application, you probably want to give users some write access. But for this example, I'm just going to say allow read access for every single users and just don't allow any kind of write access for anybody. Let's hit submit. So for this prompt, I'm asking Cursor to once again create a migration file using the Supabase CLI with npx and then enable role level security. And then in an actual production app, you probably want to grant some kind of write access to the users. But for this particular example, I am going with just allow anybody to access the dashboard, but do not allow anybody to write to the database whatsoever. Let's hit send and see what Cursor can come up with. So you can see that this rule was automatically applied to Cursor, which is great. It's working out great. And let's run this command to once again create a new migration file. And then within this file, Cursor will write the role level security policies that will allow read access to every single users and not allow any write access to any other table whatsoever, which basically means no policies. It looks good. I think it looks good. Let's accept all and reset database. Guess I forgot to include that in the prompt, but Cursor will need to run this Supabase DB reset command to have this role level security policy be applied to the local instance of the Supabase that we have running. Alright, let's head back over to the app, refresh, confirm that all the numbers are loaded. If we go to our dashboard, we can see that we no longer have the warning. And if we go to authentication, policies, we have a bunch of policies that allow certain action to be performed by the user. Now that our app is all secured, I think it's time to deploy it to the cloud. Let me start out by creating a new Supabase instance. We can just head over to database.new and create a new Supabase project. I'm just gonna call mine charts. And database password, we can generate a password. And we want to copy this password because we'll be using it later. But if you don't have your password handy, don't worry. You can always update it to a new password from the Supabase dashboard, so it's not an issue at all. And the Supabase project is ready. Let's get this last string from the URL, because we'll be needing that. That's called the Supabase reference. Let's open up a new Cursor, Composer, or agent window and ask Cursor to once again connect to the remote Supabase instance actually. So I'm just asking it to connect to the remote Supabase instance, providing the Supabase project reference, and once again just asking it to use npx. Great, it's running the command to link the project to a remote Supabase project. And here it's asking me to enter the database password, which I can just paste because I had it in my clipboard. And then just like that, it is connected. Supabase project has been successfully linked. Now we can run Supabase DB pull, which pulls the database migration from the remote instance, but there has not been any migration, which is expected because it's a fresh new Supabase instance. But we don't want to. I see that there's a mismatch between your local migration history and let's repair the migration history as suggested. I guess I would imagine against a fresh Supabase instance, we could just call Supabase DB push, but this could work. So we can now run Supabase DB pull. I guess the migration status of the local database and this remote database is now the same. Okay, it's not doing what I thought it would be doing, but we can trust Cursor and wait for a little bit. So it's done pulling in a bunch of data from something, and then it's asking me to update migration history table. Sure, yes, and it also created this new migration table. And come to think about it, it might be because I'm not using the latest version of the Supabase CLI that this is being caused. But okay, so Supabase DB pull is done. It's linked. Your project is properly connected to the Supabase remote instance. Now we should be able to run Supabase DB push. So push the local data up to remote. Hopefully this succeeds, but if not, we could probably update the CLI to the latest version and see if that works. So if we take a look at the table editor, there are no tables. Supabase DB push. Connecting to remote database is up to date. This message indicates that your remote database is already up to date with your local changes. This means that all your migrations and schema changes have already been applied, which is clearly not true because we have 3 migrations. So, yep, that's the local version. This is the remote version, the charts. If we take a look at the migrations, Supabase migrations, and schema migrations, we can see that, okay, all these migrations, financial data tables, update revenue data, monthly, enable role level security, are there. You know what? It's not a... Yep, let's... Card info viewable by everyone. Yeah, let's delete these migrations. So we're just gonna do that. Delete from Supabase migrations. This should hopefully reset the state to where the migration has not been updated and allow us to push it. So npx Supabase, push the migration up again. I wonder if this is required. Let's try it. Oh, there's a force command. There's no force command, okay. No flags, just the same command. Yes. Now has the migration been applied? Let's go to public schema. Maybe refresh. Alright, what happened? The migration had been successfully pushed. All migrations applied. Remote schema. Oh, because, right. Because the database was out of sync, it created this remote schema file which keeps everything in sync, which means it deletes all the tables. Right, so okay. I should have corrected Cursor when it was trying to pull when I thought it should be pushing. But push once again without any flags. So now that we have deleted the additional migration file that the Supabase DB pool created, we should be able to push this file, push these migrations, and finally all these tables are created. Great. And then we can even add some seed data, which we can just run from the SQL editor. And there you go, we have the same seed data within the table. If I hit refresh, there you go. All we need to do in order for this app to be connected to the remote Supabase instance is by updating the credentials. So let's take a look at the m.local, paste the Supabase URL here, and Supabase anonymous key right here. And we probably need to rerun the npm run dev command, which we can, just like so. And once we hit refresh on the app, it is refreshing. Okay. Ignore that hydration error because that's fine. We can see that it's actually connected to this remote charts Supabase instance, because if we change the card info to 1111, we can see that the card info, where is the card info? Alright, the card info is gone, but sure, revenue data, let's change the March to something ridiculously high. Hit refresh, and yep, March is ridiculously high, proving that this app is indeed connected to the remote Supabase instance. So yeah, there was a little bit of hiccup at the end, but just to remember that against a fresh Supabase instance, do not run db pull, but always run db push. And at the end, we were able to create a nice application using Next.js, Supabase, and Cursor. Cursor agent was able to take us pretty far, and I'm actually pretty impressed with how everything turned out. And I hope you remember all the tips that I shared in this video, and I cannot wait to see what kind of awesome apps you'll be building with Supabase.